And with this, we come to the concluding Outlook panel, where I'm gonna ask to join my colleagues Arne Müller from Novartis, Carrie Northcott from Pfizer, Sohini from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and Dudley Tabakin from VivoSense to join me to discuss the outlook for digital biomarkers in the post-COVID environment. I just want to ask colleagues to briefly self-introduce you and give a little bit of a perspective of what is your background and what are you exactly working on. Maybe Sohini, you quickly start, but obviously kind of you already gave a perspective on who you are and what you're doing. So just remind people who may have joined just after the break.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sohini Chowdhury. I'm the Deputy CEO at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. And I sort of oversee a lot of our industry engagement, our work with different stakeholders, including patients, and recruitment and retention, and lead our very large pre-competitive biomarker.
Welcome back, Sohini. Then we have Kerry Northcott.
Hi, all. I'm Carrie Northcott. I'm a director and project lead within digital medicine and translational imaging within early clinical development at Pfizer, a lot of words. I'm leading up a great team that's really looking at that scratch and sleep endpoint and developing those algorithms that Nikhil and Yorgos spoke of earlier and deploying those, everything from idea, validation to deploying them in large clinical trials worldwide.
Very good. Welcome, Kerry. Arne?
Thank you. My name is Arne Müller, and I'm working as a data scientist in digital endpoints at Novartis, early research, early clinical studies. I've worked a lot in the gait field, mobility, recently also moving into the neuromuscular space, and I'm happy to see that a lot of problems that we have here in the company with digital endpoints are actually not specific to Novartis. They are actually very generic, and I made a lot of notes, and I think I'll come back to my team with a lot of ideas, and hopefully I can contribute here to this panel.
Excellent. Well, that's exactly the purpose of this summit, Arne. And then we have Dudley.
Hi all, yes, my name is Dudley Tabakin. I am CEO of VivoSense. You've heard a little bit about our adventures at VivoSense from Kate and Jeremy. VivoSense has actually been around for 10 years now. We were founded in 2010 and really with the express direction of developing digital endpoints. So you can see that this has been a work of 10 years for all of us. And you know, we're getting though to a stage where I think we're about to leapfrog forward, and potentially COVID-19 has even accelerated that. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Excellent. Welcome, Dudley. Well, let me link to the COVID situation and kind of close the parenthesis that we opened in the opening panel. I just recently saw on LinkedIn a very nice cartoon with a question, essentially, who is leading the digital transformation in your company or your environment? Is it the CEO? Is it the CIO? Or is it COVID-19? And from what I heard today, COVID-19 seems to be at least giving an additional momentum to the digital transformation, in particular to the adoption of digital tools in the decentralization efforts of clinical trials. So if I kick it off with a general question, and then we can do a quick opinion by everybody. If I would ask you to give me a number between 0, very low, and 100, very high, how close are we to make digital endpoints normality for clinical trials in the pharma industry? Who wants to shout out a number first?
So what do you mean exactly with digital endpoints?
I was gonna say, you're going to have to add a little more detail to that.
Oh, okay, that's now it becomes controversial. Well, let's say the usage of these digital tools, these digital endpoints, at their full potential that you personally anticipate. Where are we there on that journey? And you can add maybe one sentence what you would call your personal 100%.
I think so. I guess I can begin, and I think that Kate spoke about this in the talk earlier, but clinical validation is going to be relevant. So it's going to really be dependent on the disease state and your clinical validation. So if we give the example that VivoSense gave, we talked about the best 6-minute effort. We're at that analytical validation stage and looking to do more clinical validation at this point. So, how far along? Maybe 30 out of 100 on that one, maybe 40. Okay. And that's how I see it. And then, for other disease states, for other clinical validations, yeah, it really depends on which, Carrie, I know, is quite far along with the Scratch algorithm. So, there's an example of another one that's maybe higher. She can give a number for that, but I think it's very specific to the actual clinical.
To the actual use case. If you look at the field overall, that is essentially the intent of my question, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it's going to base on the area that you're in. I mean, as Dudley alluded to, I think we're close in the scratch and sleep. We're collecting clinical data. We're looking at that clinical relevance. We're looking at how, as this is unfolded, we're seeing new challenges and new things, and you just keep tackling each hurdle as it comes. We're hoping to speak and work with the regulators to see how we can add this to an endpoint. We also have to remember Scratch is a different endpoint than they've ever put on as a label claim. So we're not only arguing for a digital endpoint, we're now adding for something that's completely different than has ever been before. So we're having to look at it from different perspectives. But I don't know how to give it a number, but I'd like to think we're pretty close, but I'm a very positive thinker. So, but I think we're really, really close to getting there. We're getting the patient's perspective. They're excited about it. The informal feedback we're getting in regulatory has been very positive. There's still hurdles to come, but I think we're getting really close to being able to kind of break that boundary of getting into clinical trials as a key endpoint, in fact, primary or secondary.
Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah, I can second that, Kerry. My experience is also that working with rare disease is particularly interesting in this respect, because there we often lack the proper clinical endpoints. So teams are very eager to deploy digital endpoints in there. We have a patient population and patient stakeholders that are very engaged and very enthusiastic to participate. We have a very interesting and short regulatory path in these rare disease, and we have the chance to go from early research, digital endpoints that we develop in early research, to push them through straight to the pivotal studies. And in that respect, I think at least the studies I'm involved in, I would say we are, let's say, 70% there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sohini.
I think, I don't know, I mean, I have to look at it obviously from the Parkinson's lens, and I think that maybe I wouldn't say 70, but what I would say is that I think that we are sort of at an inflection point right now where there are a lot of digital endpoints that are being utilized in trials as sort of, exploratory outcomes. And I think I say it's the inflection point because I think this is now where the proof is in the pudding. We're going to get a lot of really tangible data that is going to help us understand how close we are to that. So the fact that we have so much activity, I think could really accelerate things, but I think we're kind of just on the cusp as compared to some of the colleagues on the panel who are a little bit more further along, because digital endpoints are really just now being utilized in sort of phase 2 trials as exploratory endpoints. So we're a little behind the curve, but given the momentum, I'm hoping we will get to that 70 mark or that 60 mark or whatever the panelists feel they are at. I hope we'll get there shortly.
Very good. So sounds an average that we are half through on the race. So that's very promising. We have heard, obviously it's not an easy race, right? And you might have seen the theme that we had anticipated to really cover more broadly with this 4A rating, and in particular, obviously the adherence to the assessments that we ask patients to do is a key dimension there. So if we think about really that patient engagement, patient adherence here, kind of getting the partnership with the patients right, that they are collecting the data. Kind of what do patients expect today from digital biomarkers? Today and let's say in the future, is there what is the feedback that you are hearing compared to the past, where essentially we were happy that we could actually get tools and solutions out to them? So what is now the feedback that we get from patients when they are confronted with these tools?
They're excited. Oh, go ahead.
So just, it's more an anecdotal comment. We had digital endpoints in a pediatric study, and we collected feedback from the families, and there it was a lot about fun. This endpoint is fun. This endpoint is no fun at all.
Oh.
Okay, so we are already at the fun dimension of things.
Well, not in all studies, I would say, right? And it depends on the population.
Good. So I noted down fun. Carrie, you wanted to add something as well.
I think the patients are excited to be a partner in their healthcare. They're now actively involved in what's going on and wanting to know that feedback. In fact, that's one of the big things I hear about is not only I'm happy to do it, but can I get the information as well? So they're excited to partner with it, and it's no longer just going to a doctor and getting an outcome. They're actually feeling more involved and more knowing about their condition. And with pediatrics, it is about fun. We have to think about that population a lot different than we do adults. We have to make things fun and game and enjoyable and bright colors. And you have to think about both populations differently. But we've had really great feedback from both kids as well as adults when we've engaged with them.
I would say I would agree with that. Like, I think that there's a lot of excitement amongst individuals who are hearing about this. They appreciate the fact that it's more of a two-way, there's an ability to have a better two-way dialogue than it might be if you have to wait a while to see your clinical trial physician and hear what's going on, et cetera. And even then the physician may not say anything. So there is this sense that if it's done really well, you get more information. I think some of the challenges obviously is that, participant burden is still an issue, even with digital data collection. And I think we can't lose sight of that. So if you're working all day, for example, and you have to do active tests, that you have to still factor that into the lifestyle. I will just say that one of the things that has come up a little bit more and more is the fact that, I assume this is relevant for other disease states, is that the clinical trial population for Parkinson's patients tends to be overwhelmingly Caucasian, as well as highly educated. And so they already are dealing with, an Apple Watch, or they have, their fancy phone with lots of apps and things like that. And I do think that one of the things we're hearing about is that as we in the Parkinson's field are trying to kind of get a more diverse and representative population engaged in trials, there are different issues that come up when you think about digital data collection. Not all populations are comfortable with the concept of being monitored in a digital app. And I think that I think that is something we're going to have to tackle, as if we truly want to get more diverse representation, is the fact that the comfort and ease with these digital technologies in certain populations that tend to predominantly be in clinical research right now, that may not translate into other populations that we are seeking to bring in. And I think that is something we have to keep in mind as we think about how we communicate things, we think about how we position things, and we think about what we really need versus what's a nice to have.
Yeah, very good. I think you mentioning there are two very important dimensions, and the one is really around the patient burden, and the other one around kind of, I hear that, data playback, right? Maybe we stick a little bit with the patient burden. Based on your experience from all the trials and the rollouts and the deployments you've been doing, kind of what are the key learnings there in terms of what do patients perceive as burden versus kind of what can we actually do better in the future?
I think
So
one of the big things, yes, with kids, it's fun, bright colors, etc. But I think when we first started working in this space, we looked at a number of different devices and a number of different things. And I took off my scientist hat and I put on my I'm a mom hat and said, okay, what would I do? And I started playing with the devices and going, okay, well, this isn't going to work because this part pops off. And if that part pops off, they're going to spend the whole time playing with it. So really cool device, does great stuff, but is more scientific in nature, won't work in clinical trials. And you had to really put a different hat on, as you commented earlier, what's nice to have versus need to have. And you need to really think about the device and how it's going to be used and what you're trying to collect, and really keep the patient involvement, the charging, the programming, etc., as much down to a minimum as possible. Because if they can break it, they're gonna, and they're gonna do it in every way that you've never even thought of. It's really impressive. There's some things I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. But those are just things you really have to think up front when you start to figure out what kind of devices to use and understand that patient burden, like having them do tasks 10 times a day. That's not realistic. So, okay, what's going to give me the information I need without overtasking the patient? And there's going to be burnout. There's going to be different types of things. So, you know, how to charge the battery, how to deal with data loss, et cetera. Those are all things you have to think of, especially when it comes to the patient, you know. So those are some of the learnings we've already had. But yeah, looking at the devices, and it sounds silly, but we bought like I had a stack of different devices and we looked at all of them and went, okay, let's play with them for a while and see what happens. And, oh, I have to charge this every 24 hours. Well, that's probably not going to work because I'm going to charge at night when I'm sleeping, and that's when I want to collect data. So that, you know, those are the things you had to think about in patient burden.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add that, although in our findings, we've worked in some rare disease actually with Roche, and you know, patient engagement is actually quite high, and there's a lot of interest when they're a patient. You know, they really want to collect this data, whether it's passively or actively, and they'll do as much as they can. Obviously, you know, we don't want them to have to engage too much. In our opinion, passive is better because you want them actually to continue with everyday life, right? You don't want them actually changing the way they live because they're getting alerted all the time. And I'll go back to if you're trying to measure daily living activity and you keep telling them to go for a walk, that's not going to help in your digital biomarker development. So yeah.
And you've artificially modified their daily habits already. So
there you go.
Yeah, very, very good point, right? Kind of else you're introducing a bias by introducing the measurement tool. Very good point. Thinking about the second dimension that was mentioned, right? So obviously one way to do what Dudley just mentioned is a risky option, obviously, is to play data back. We have, for example, in Roche trials also received feedback that patients said, like, well, it's all nice and fine that we are happy, and as you said, Dudley, we are happy and motivated to provide you that data. I would be curious though to see what that data looks like. What is the outcome there, right? So how are we going to handle this going forward, right? Do we need to design our trials differently to enable this in a seamless way? Do we need to ask patients to stay patient regarding data playback? What is your perspective on this?
I saw a comment earlier in our meeting here where someone said, do you all take extra steps at the end of the day to meet your step count? And there was an exact example of that type of thing. But I think from our perspective, and what we're looking to do is develop platforms that send feedback to the patient just to the level that keeps them engaged, but doesn't inform them to go and do more or to change their habits. It's a difficult balancing act. I don't say we have the solution right now, but you know, and I think again, it's going to depend on the capability of the patient population. Yeah, but I think a limited data set that just gives you enough information to motivate you to continue collect the data is really where it needs to be at, and not too much more, and obviously not too little so that they're not engaged.
I think when we think about data to report back to patients, it falls into different buckets. I think there's the motivation factor, as you just mentioned, Dudley, which can be sort of like, you know, stars, like, you know, how much research did you provide today, or like, are you a super research contributor because you did 100% of whatever, you know, things like that. That can be really motivating and acknowledges what they're providing. I think that's one bucket. I think there's another bucket that where patients want to understand, well, what am I giving to you and what does it mean? And I think that's the tricky one. And I think, you know, again, I have to say I'm more familiar, obviously, with the Parkinson's landscape. We don't really know yet exactly what it means. We know, you know, maybe your tremor is like this, or maybe your balance is like this over 3 days. But what does that actually mean with respect to your disease? We don't have the absolutes to say that yet, and nor would we want to do that. Plus, you know, I think as with many diseases, we know Parkinson's patients tell us when they are about to go to the doctor, they perform. They, like any human being, they want to do well when they're being evaluated. And so you also don't want to give them information that will make them, as someone pointed out, adjust their behavior in a way that's not their normal behavior. That being said, I do think there's a lot of opportunity to provide benchmark data. It makes you feel that you're participating, you're one of a group, you're contributing, etc. And it gives you a sense of, like, you know, there are X number of people in your region participating in research. X number of people, you know, walked 5 miles today, or 3, or whatever it may be. And I think that that's something, in the absence of being able to give absolutes about this is what is happening to you today, and this is what it means. This is a way to still create that kind of motivation, that sense that you're part of something that's larger and we want you to continue, as well as gives them a sense of who they are within a study and and who others are. And it makes it feel also a little bit less alone, I think, at times, which can happen with a digital sort of component. So that's some of the things that we've been thinking about this, but obviously it's a tricky question.
I think we also need to think about the sites. This may sound a bit old-fashioned in this context now, but talking about clinical sites and clinical visits. But if the sites are not convinced about the endpoint, the digital endpoint, they will not be able to convince the patient either. We had this in the study, and only when we started feeding back data, at least some compliance data with fancy plots to the sites, they started to understand and inform the patients, and then we saw an increase in compliance.
Yeah, I think the sites are very important. Yep.
We have to put on our salesman's hat in some ways.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we know that the data is important, or at least we feel it is. It has a gain for them. But a lot of times we're like, just wear the device. And we're not going to tell you anything about it. Just wear it. We're going to take it and we're going to learn from it. But we have to start sharing some of that data. But again, it has to be in the right context. I can't have someone get that feedback in the middle of a clinical trial because it can influence them. I was one of those. I have to get to 10,000 steps. I have 500 more to go. I'd be sitting beside my bed, standing and marching in place, trying to get to my 10,000 steps. Or I'd figure out ways to make it happen. But we also have to engage them to give them purpose and understand that. And again, put on that salesman's hat, both to the sites and the participants, explain this is really going to benefit you and this is how.
Yeah, definitely. I think sites are the secret there, right? They are the trainer kind of setup. If they buy in, they ultimately are the business card to the patients. Absolutely. And if they are enthusiastic, the patient will feel that there's purpose behind what they are doing. Very good. So kind of looking at the development, right? Dudley, kind of you are here, if you want, so representing a a vendor who can offer solutions to the pharma industry. We had it briefly touched on it earlier in the presentations. What are your biggest challenges with the pharma industry right now, and what would we need to overcome in order to work more fruitfully together?
Well, yeah, you know, I will reiterate what Jeremy and Kate said. In order to do a lot of the clinical validation, the pharma industry, you have the data, you have a lot of it, and you know, just sharing it with teams like ours in order to push forward that digital endpoint development will be really useful. Well, it'll just speed things up on our side. Another piece that is of interest to us is ground truth. You know, if there's ground truth data alongside this, whatever's collected, accelerometry data or ECG patch data, that will just, you know, greatly improve the ability to get to an endpoint and present this data to the FDA, which is really what you're trying to do in the pharmaceutical industry. And we're out here to support you. That's our goal. That I know Jeremy talks about it. We talk about it. You know, we're here to partner with the sponsors, with you guys, and to help you push these digital endpoints forward as quickly as we can. You know, we're VivoSense in particular, we're an analytics shop, so that's what we're doing. We want to hear from you what you want, and we're going to work with you to provide it as quickly as we can. And yeah, just getting into those conversations early. I think Jeremy said that, and sharing data if you can with us, you know, at that early stage to help in the development. I think that'll drive things along from our side.
Yeah, very good. Let's open up the space of collaboration a bit broader, right? So we had been mentioning in the talks Translational, the Innovative Medicine Initiative, the Critical Path Institute, and please forgive me if I forgot others to mention. Kind of how can and shall we collaborate going forward, right? Is there anything that we are not doing yet at all, something that we should kind of do completely different going forward? Is there anything concrete that we could change as of essentially tomorrow? Not traveling back now, because literally we are working from home as we can see here even in the panel. But what should change there in the collaboration setups?
I'm going to add one more thing, just jump in and add one more thing specifically about that, is I think the data format platforms, I know every time we do another contract, there's a new data transfer agreement that is a completely different format to the previous one. And I think standardizing a data transfer format would be great, because digital endpoints, continuous data measurements, it's very different to the format of you know, the data that's been collected in the past, and it often doesn't fit in. I don't know if we have any CROs on this call, but doesn't fit in with the CROs ECRF platforms, and maybe standardizing something like that would be a step in the right direction to make things also smoother and easier for the FDA. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good. Other perspectives?
Go ahead, please.
So just to throw this in from the regulatory aspect is something that needs a lot of collaboration, and where different pharma companies and the tech companies really have to work together. I mean, I'm in Mobilized in the consortium, and I can see now this is such a huge effort that it really requires more than just one company.
So I have to apologize, since I can't mute, you're hearing the effects of working from a New York City apartment with a 5-year-old who is very good at breaking things. I was going to say that one of the things, sort of jumping off on the last comment, is with the regulators. I worry a little bit about the fact that I think so many conversations are happening one-on-one or within one disease state and one part of the regulator authorities. And I feel that sometimes these learnings or these communications are not cutting across diseases. Lucas, inside voice. So I think that these things are, and I feel that that slows the field down because we are always sort of having to restart conversations, or we're tackling the same issues, but we don't seem to be doing it as a field. So I wonder, you know, and I don't have the answer for this. There are groups obviously like the Critical Path Initiative, et cetera. But even there, that's sort of siloed. I'm not sure that, you know, it cuts across. And so I do think that we're all having these discussions, yet we're not, it just seems like we're recreating it, and it kind of doesn't, we're not learning or leveraging in the perhaps the most optimized way.
Yeah, very, very good observation, Sohini. Thanks for sharing.
I can echo everybody. I think we're sharing well, but we need to do more. We need to continue to do share across the groups. I know there's various opportunities to do so, especially as we had not only just the FDA, but other regulatory bodies, as well as also how to tackle, there's different legal ramifications in every country about how to handle data and how we're handling that. ICDs are different, especially with digital data from country to country. We've gotten to know a lot of lawyers across the world now, and really sharing those learnings back and forth of how to approach things and how to do things is again valuable. So I think we're getting there. It's just, we're in a unique space in that we get to share that information. So I think we should take advantage of it and continue to share.
One initiative I came across recently is the Open Wearables Initiative. So that's driven by a few key players in the field, and they collect data that you can contribute for, or one of the purposes is that you can compare algorithms. Let's say you have a new algorithm for step counts or gait speed, then you can use their data. Somebody else can use exactly the same data, that you can even run it on their platform, and you have a direct one-to-one comparison. That means you can really compare apples and apples, which we can't do at the moment, I think.
Yeah, that's also a very good point. I see that we are already kind of coming to the hour, so we need to conclude. If I would ask every of you to kind of give in one sentence a perspective of what should happen next. Kind of what is your wish for a change maybe next week, right? If there's one thing you could ask for, what would that be? Regarding
okay.
digital biomarkers, sorry. Huh?
Yeah.
Not yet Christmas.
Yeah, so you know, I'll just reiterate the point I said about our collaboration with pharma. You know, if you're willing to share that data or data that you've collected in the past with development teams, you know, that would be something we'd really like. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Dudley.
Oh, for Christmas, if I'm hoping and wishing, I would say it'd be a primary or secondary endpoint agreed to by regulators. That would be my goal. We're so close in so many different ways. I'd really like to see someone finally break through there and get that agreement as we move forward.
Very good.
And I wish for a common API for wearable sensors, for example, that you can stick them all into the same network, and that, you know, they can talk to each other, and that we can write our own apps that connect to all of them.
I think given that we're so focused right now on trying to make sense of all of the data that exists in our ecosystem, I would say the rate limiting step are data use agreements, having some sort of standardized approach so that you're not spending months or potentially a year or plus on that, as well as I think any ability to have some sort of common data standard so you're not spending enormous amounts of time trying to harmonize and translate so that the data can talk to each other. That would be amazing if there was sort of, you know, you were able to turn on the light and that was all worked out.
Wonderful. thank you so much. Unfortunately, I guess we need to conclude here, even though I sense there's so many other topics to discuss and there's so much passion. And I see that even though we are overrunning, we still have 136 participants still online, which is just mind-blowing. So let me thank you, Sohini in particular, kind of dual tasking there right now. Carrie, Dudley, Arne, thank you so much for sharing your perspective here. And with this, unfortunately, we already come to the end of our this year's 2020 Digital Biomarkers in Clinical Trials Summit. I want to thank really all of you, all the speakers, all the panelists, really kind of all the participants. We had, I just looked constantly at the numbers and it was just mind-blowing. We had constantly roughly 200 people online listening and participating actively through the POLF and sharing their thoughts and their questions. Really amazing. I wasn't hoping for this, but very engaging discussion. Excellent. I'm so happy to see this lively community. I want in particular to thank all the people in the background that enabled this. In particular here, Desiree Kirstein, Angelique Alfred, the Roche Comms team and the IT department at Roche that enabled us from an infrastructure perspective. I also obviously want to thank the co-organizer Panagora, Doug, Tom. Thank you so much for all the lively discussions, how we can actually, under those special circumstances, we can make this summit still happen. And it looks like really we got the community together again against all odds. Really amazing. Thank you so much for this lively discussion. Let's continue to build this digital biomarker community. I'm looking very much forward to hopefully seeing you all back next year, sometime in June 2021. And with this, I want to conclude. No big summary this year. We'll leave this for next year when we have much more time and people don't need to run away to their other duties. Thank you guys. Take care. Stay safe, right? The COVID thing is not yet over. Take care of yourself and your families, your loved ones. Watch out for each other. And then looking very much forward to see you all back very latest next year, hopefully in person, to continue this very important dialogue. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good evening, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.